and he just stood up in the front of the class, and this normally very shy, quiet lad starts strumming away some kind of heavy rock metal music and singing away, and then afterwards asks everybody to write down what it is they think he's expressing, what he's feeling. And people hazarded a guess, but didn't really know. And then he got a PowerPoint presentation, but it was basically, he said he was bipolar, and he used music to manage his moods. And he said a little bit about that, but then he expanded it, because what he'd done as part of his project was looked at the role that music plays in a number of different contexts. So he was looking at how music was used with women who were pregnant, and you know, relaxation music, and you know, swimming with the whales, that kind of background music. Gospel music, the whole kind of scenario of hope and expressing emotions of hope. So we went through this whole background of what music can do to contribute to people's moods and their aspirations or whatever. And then in the end, he rounded the whole thing up by, after a lot of really kind of lively discussion, by playing his guitar again, the same thing. And by that point, everybody was a lot clearer about what it was he was communicating through the music. And I think the thing at the end that people most picked up on, we didn't really know Mark beforehand, but now, as a result of this and the engagement we've had with him, we really feel that we've got to know him a lot better. And how am I for time, by the way?
We've only got two sets of presenters, so we can have a bit longer.
I mean, I don't want to be too long because I know you're in a rush, but the levels of engagement with students was absolutely tremendous, and in fact, I talk in the paper about a community of practice. We looked at the theory of community of practice, and we knew, you know, people were aware that this is what they were experiencing. It had its downside, and I'll talk about that when we come to the conclusions, but they became a very closely engaged group of students. And I arranged for them to go to the Escalate conference. The Escalate conference in April was encouraging students to go and do presentations. So I'd said to them, how would you like to come and, you know, present what it is you've been doing? So seven of them agreed to do so. And I was going to be the kind of just stand up and introduce them, and I was arranging all the practical things like their accommodation, and we've got some video clips, so I've got that all organised. But it was around the time of the volcanic ash, and I got stuck in Los Angeles and couldn't get back in time for the conference. And you know, they were going to this, they were about to set off on the train to get there, because I'd been going to go straight from Heathrow Airport to Wales, where the conference was being held. So we had an evening. I think I was in the hotel in Los Angeles from about 9 o'clock at night to 4 o'clock in the morning, Los Angeles time, which was midday UK time, trying to work out with the students how they could get hold of the videos, trying to put them on YouTube so that they could access them, etc. Telling them trying to communicate to them where their accommodation was. It was a travel lodge, but it was in the middle of nowhere, and transport was a difficulty. I had a horrible feeling they were just going to say this is too hard and back out, because their initial response was panic, we can't do it. But they were a group, and they decided to do it, and they got on the train, 4-hour train journey from Liverpool to Glamorgan and Liverpool. The feedback, they said they had the largest group there at the conference. The feedback was tremendous, and in fact, the conference organisers sent an email to the Vice-Chancellor saying how much credit they'd done the university, how well they'd done, etc. So when they got a copy of this email, they were absolutely over the moon to get that kind of feedback from the Vice-Chancellor. And then the feedback from the students themselves. So these are just some of the comments, very, very few. What I did was try to encourage a Moodle dialogue as we went along, and then right at the end we did a reflective account of the whole module. And so I'm excited at the prospect of being included in the planning process. This was a very early Moodle entry. I haven't put in any of the kind of I'm scared. There was quite a lot of the I'm scared as well. So, you know, it really was an interesting balance there. I feel the main difficulty is breaking down the barriers of traditional learning method and take on this active new role in learning. And so you can just read some of those for yourself. The one that kind of summed it all up, and I really wanted to challenge John Elliott in his keynote speech yesterday, because I just felt that, for me, what I have learned so far is that students at universities are not used to being involved as independent learners, but that if it's encouraged in the right way, they revel in it. And I think this actually says that, for the most part, university is very much about being given a lot of new knowledge and being told to go and write about a certain piece of knowledge. What we didn't understand at the time is that this aspect of university is actually the easy part. The hard part is what we had signed up to do, develop our own curriculum, decide what types of assessment we would undertake and how they would be marked. After taking this module on for 1 year, my mind has been completely turned. I now wish that every one of my lessons was like this. Even if they incorporate a small amount of active participation, I think that pupil engagement would go a lot higher. The thought that you are in charge of your own learning is a very liberating experience, and for me, I worked all the harder at it. And what came through a lot was, you know, they laughed about it actually, but when they'd done the initial planning, they thought, hey, great, we're into an easy ride here. All we do is something we're interested in and talk about it to others, and we're home and dry. And of course, they then realised that actually I'm not being told to do this. I've chosen to do this. I'm actually I'm responsible for what happens, so I've got to make sure it's done really well. And I have to say, I think if most university lecturers put the time into preparing for the sessions, as these students did, and did the range of methodologies, it would just be amazing. One student who took us to the Tate Modern in Liverpool, she actually took us out of the university and we looked around the pictures, and she was really just talking about how she'd been brought up as a child with her father, and her father used to take her out and ask her to choose a picture and then ask her just to look at it and either draw or write or do something in terms of her response to it. And she gained such a lot from that, and she wanted to do more of that kind of stuff when she hoped to go into teaching. So she encouraged us to go through the same process. So, you know, again, I experienced it with CASA in a very different way when I looked at it through, you know, the way she was working with us. And then it kind of goes back to Angela Brew's much more sophisticated model of learning and teaching, what she's working with at the moment. So you have the academic communities of practice in the middle, you have Boyer's scholarship around there, and then I guess if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, I would locate what I was doing with students of the journey conception with research as a personal journey of discovery. And we really don't have a lot of time to explore that a lot here, but I just, as I said earlier, I think the work that she's doing is very interesting in these kind of contexts. The conclusions that we draw in this is that student voice means engaging with constructions of power. It takes time for students to both trust and adjust to the principle of empowerment. And this issue became much greater than I expected. Initially, it was to do with testing out with the water with me. I think this was the kind of barrier between being scared, do you really mean it, is this a trick, Then they got really into it, and it was, you know, completely liberating in terms of what they thought, their ideas for assessment. They thought that student participation in lectures actually should be part of the assessment process. Some quite radical ideas coming out. And then they came to do their reflective account, and I was really looking forward to reading them. And when I read them, I mean, they were interesting and they were good, but they were much lower key, and none of these really interesting radical ideas and none of the extremes of their feelings were really expressed in there in a way that I knew they could. And I'd met with them afterwards because they were quite interested in looking at putting their experience into an article. And what they were saying it was that, yes, you know, we don't know where this sits with the rest of the university. There's going to be a second marker, and there's going to be an external examiner, and we just wanted to be careful. And I hadn't predicted that in the slightest. That was really interesting, and I just thought, you know, if this form of learning is to become part of a university culture, it needs to go beyond the kind of single module. It needs to be ingrained in a much more comprehensive way. The other bit was around this community of practice, in that some learning to be done with this, I think. Certainly, I mean, remembering these are pretty young students, they're in the main 19-year-olds. And what had happened is they had become very close, and they had become very engaged with each other and supportive. But it came through in one particular session with a young woman who was a radical feminist, really. Now, she was a very confident young woman. She was student union leader, and she was a very strong socialist, and she was used to going to political events and putting on presentations and being very sharply challenged, and she could stand up for herself. She was also an extreme feminist. Her mother was, and she'd been brought up right from the word go to be a feminist. So she kind of saw herself as a feminist first and a woman second, because as extreme as that. And she thought every woman, and even men, she thought everyone should be feminists, but she was so critical of the idea that any woman would not be a feminist. And one of her friends in the group, someone she got quite close to over the module, disagreed with her completely. I'm not a feminist. I don't believe in it. And it was a huge clash and it got probably the most lively discussion we've had. But it was the effect on this girl, and I followed her up with it in a tutorial afterwards. She was really upset by it, really upset. There had been two things that had happened that had gone beyond her expectations. One, she didn't expect such a vociferous response. I mean, they were very used in university to doing presentations, but normally it would be a group who were just waiting to do their own presentation, and there'd be the conventional clap at the end, and perhaps one or two desultory questions, but no one really engaged with it. Whereas in this experience, they were really engaging with it. But secondly, she thought she was with a group of friends, so she thought everybody was going to agree with her. She didn't expect this kind of disagreement. She certainly didn't expect a real radical challenge. And in her own head, she hadn't sorted out yet that you could be a friend and still radically challenge and then go back to being a friend. She just had to, there was a whole emotional experience there that in the end would be a good learning experience for her, but very, very tough. And again, took me completely by surprise, because I hadn't necessarily expected that. And so, if we're going to develop the community of practice, certainly, the learning for me with students is to think that within that context is the ability to deal with the whole range of emotions. And then finally, for me, again, coming from action research and a living theory approach, I just think it provides a hugely valuable framework for inquiring into how to improve research and informed teaching, and for supporting the development of students as researchers, because you're starting off with this question of what matters to you, what's important to you. And although I had a very good module for doing it in active participation and learning, I actually think you could start with that in any subject. In any subject, what really interests you, what's important to you in this, what's the area that you're particularly passionate about, and then and take it from there. And I just feel it's worthwhile exploring in this kind of context. So there you are, that's me. Thank you very much.